Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking at the book of Jonah today.
Oh, excellent choice.
Yeah, and we'll be using the King James Version.
Okay.
And we're going to try to really uncover some of the positive teachings in Jonah's story. People think they know this story, but I think there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story that's so rich with symbolism and metaphor, and, it offers valuable lessons for anyone.
Right.
Especially, those seeking to deepen their faith.
Right. And, we talk a lot about faith here, but also goodness and our connections with others. And I think Jonah's journey really speaks to all of that.
It does. I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. So let's start at the beginning. We have God calling Jonah to preach to the people of Nineveh.
Right.
And instead of Jonah being like, okay, I'm ready to go, let's do this thing, he takes off in the opposite direction.
Yeah, he decides to run away.
Yeah, and not just like, down the street or to the next town over.
Yeah.
He sets sail for Tarshish, which, geographically speaking, is like as far away from Nineveh as you can get.
Yeah.
So, it's not just procrastination. This is deliberate disobedience.
Yeah. He's making a statement. What do you think? Was he scared?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think...
Nineveh was, notorious for its wickedness.
Yeah.
Maybe he was afraid of them. Or maybe you saw them as enemies.
And this is just, me putting myself in Jonah's shoes for a moment. Maybe he just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
It was going to be difficult. It was going to be uncomfortable.
Maybe disrupt his life.
Right. And so he chooses his own comfort over God's will.
Absolutely. And as we often see when someone tries to run from their calling, things don't go smoothly.
Right.
Enter the storm.
This is not just some, light rain. We're talking like a major tempest.
Yeah. The ship's about to break apart. The sailors are terrified, praying to their own gods. They're throwing cargo overboard.
It's like chaos.
Yeah, it's really a powerful image of just what can happen when we're not aligned with our purpose, when we try to run from, what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it makes you think about, all those times in your life when you try to avoid something difficult.
Mm.
And sometimes, it blows up in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even just about us. Like, our actions affect other people. Look at these sailors. They're caught in this storm because of Jonah.
We are all interconnected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they cast lots. Jonah's the one who gets singled out.
Mm.
Can you imagine the tension on that ship? Like, you're in the middle of this raging storm, and suddenly you realize one guy is the reason for it all.
Talk about a bad trip.
Right. So, to Jonah's credit, he owns up to it.
He does. He doesn't try to hide.
No, he confesses that he's the reason for the storm.
Yeah.
And tells him to throw him overboard.
Wow.
Yeah. He says, do this, appease God, and the sea will calm down.
It's a remarkable act of courage.
It is. Like, even in his disobedience, he recognizes God's power. He knows he has to take responsibility.
There's a lesson in there for all of us.
Absolutely. And then we come to one of the most iconic images in the Bible. Jonah getting swallowed by a giant fish.
3 days and nights inside the fish. It's like symbolic death and resurrection.
What do you think that experience symbolized for Jonah?
Well, it must have been terrifying to be engulfed in that darkness, completely isolated, facing the consequences of his actions. It's a powerful image.
Yeah, and, in the midst of this ordeal, Jonah cries out to God.
He prays from the belly of hell.
Which, it's interesting because that phrase in the Hebrew can also mean the grave. So it adds like another layer of meaning. He's literally and metaphorically staring death in the face.
Right, and yet even in that darkness, he remembers God. He finds hope.
It's like a reminder that even when we feel lost and far from God, prayer can be that lifeline.
It's a way to reconnect. And it leads us to this turning point in his journey, this profound change. But we're going to have to leave it there for now.
Yeah.
Jonah's journey is far from over.
Stay tuned, because next time we'll discover what happens when Jonah finally makes it to Nineveh and the surprising reaction he encounters.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Jonah. So last time we left off with our reluctant prophet inside the belly of that big fish.
Yeah, quite a predicament. And from the depths of despair, Jonah starts to pray.
He does. He's crying out for deliverance, and his prayers are answered.
In a rather dramatic fashion, I'd say.
The text tells us that the Lord spake unto the fish, and it vomited out Jonah upon the dry land. Not exactly subtle.
Definitely not. But it emphasizes God's power, right?
Mm-hmm.
That willingness to offer second chances.
Absolutely. Which is exactly what Jonah gets. God gives him that same mission again.
Go to Nineveh and preach. You'd think after that whole ordeal, Jonah would be a little more cooperative.
You would think. It really makes you wonder what's going through his mind at this point. Was it just blind obedience? Or had something truly shifted within him?
Well, the text says, he arose and went unto Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. So he obeys. But I still wonder, was there a part of him that was still hesitant?
It's interesting because the text tells us Nineveh was this massive city, like it took 3 days to travel across. But Jonah, he only goes a day's journey in before he delivers his message. Do you think he was dragging his feet a little? Maybe hoping they wouldn't actually listen?
I mean, it's possible, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't exactly thrilled about this mission the first time around.
Right.
But he does deliver the message. He cries out, yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And, you have to remember the Ninevites, they had this reputation for wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd expect them to just, laugh him off. But that's not what happens.
That's where things get interesting.
Yeah, they actually listen. The people of Nineveh, from the king on down, they take Jonah's words to heart.
They don't argue. They don't ignore him. They respond with humility. Like they genuinely want to change.
It's pretty remarkable. They proclaim a fast. They put on sackcloth, which, by the way, is like this rough, scratchy fabric. It was a sign of mourning and repentance.
And they cry out to God for forgiveness.
Yeah, everyone's involved. Even the king, he steps down from his throne, he covers himself in sackcloth and sits in ashes.
That's not just a symbolic gesture. It's a public display of just, deep remorse. It's a commitment to changing their ways.
Yeah, it really is. It's like the whole society is acknowledging their wrongdoing and seeking God's mercy. And it seems like it's sincere. It's not just about avoiding punishment. They actually want to change their hearts.
And God sees this. He sees their repentance, and he decides to spare the city.
And an act of divine mercy.
It's a testament to God's boundless love, that willingness to forgive those who turn to him, a reminder that nobody's beyond redemption.
It's a message of hope, second chances. But not everyone's happy about this turn of events.
No. Jonah is, shall we say, less than pleased. In fact, he's downright furious.
Welcome back. We left off with Jonah not exactly thrilled about God's decision to spare Nineveh.
Yeah, he's actually pretty angry about it.
He is. In fact, he prays to God, and it's almost like he's saying, see, I told you so.
Yeah, he's basically saying, this is why I didn't want to come here in the first place. You knew this would happen.
He's frustrated. God didn't bring the destruction that he prophesied. It's like, did he want to be right more than he wanted these people to be saved?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question, right? It makes you think about our own motivations sometimes.
It does. Are we willing to let go of our own expectations in order to embrace God's mercy and compassion, especially when it's, directed towards those we may not deem worthy?
It's a tough question. So what happens next? How does God respond to Jonah's little temper tantrum?
Well, he doesn't rebuke him, not directly anyway. He does something a little more unexpected. He provides Jonah with a gourd for shade.
Yeah. It grows up overnight, and it offers Jonah some relief from that hot Middle Eastern sun.
So he's happy, right? Finally, something good happens.
Well, the text says that he was exceeding glad of the gourd. But the next day, God sends a worm, and it withers the gourd.
Oh, come on. Poor Jonah. First the fish, now this.
Yeah. It might seem like a small thing, the loss of a plant, but I think this whole gourd incident, it symbolizes something deeper. Jonah's so attached to his own comfort, his own little bit of shade, that he's missing the bigger picture.
He's more upset about this gourd than he was about the potential destruction of a whole city.
Exactly. And God calls him out on it. He says, "Do thou well to be angry for the gourd."
It's a question that still applies to us today, doesn't it? Are we letting our own personal frustrations, our little discomforts, overshadow the needs of others?
Are our own biases preventing us from seeing things clearly? And this leads us to the final statement in the book. God reminds Jonah that Nineveh is a great city with over 120,000 people who cannot discern between their right hand and their left hand, and also many animals.
Right. The animals. It's easy to forget about them, but they're affected too.
And God cares for them all. It's a powerful image, isn't it? It expands our understanding of God's compassion. It's not just about us, it's about all of creation.
So as we wrap up our look at Jonah, what are the key takeaways we can apply to our own lives?
Well, first, no matter how far we run from our calling, there's always a path back. God's mercy and love, they're always there.
Second, repentance and forgiveness. These are powerful forces for change. The Ninevites, they showed us that.
And finally, true compassion. It has to extend beyond ourselves, beyond our own little circle. We have to recognize the inherent worth of all beings, even those who are different from us, even our enemies.
It's a challenging message, but it's one we all need to hear. We hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about. The book of Jonah, it's full of valuable lessons. We encourage you to read it again, reflect on it, and see how its message can guide you on your own journey of faith. Thanks for joining us.